Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel, guys. Today I am going to make a new video, so please sarapakara. Yes. Okay, thank you.
This is the underground world in which future mankind will live because of the destruction and poisoning of the earth 140 years later. We have no choice but to live in this silo, which is like an ant's nest. In this subterranean world of rules and regulations, anything to do with going outside is a deadly taboo. For 140 years, humans have been accustomed to it, but one woman who wanted to have a child uses herself as a guide to discover the secret behind it all. Mary was an ordinary woman living in a silo. Her husband was also a sheriff here. Today is the day they are allowed to have children, because inside the silo, there is a strict population control system. All humans who want to have children here have to be approved, and there's a 1-year time limit for conception. The Marys were very lucky. Their application for permission to have a baby was approved by the top authorities. They were delighted to see the approval in the mail. They then went on to the hospital to have their birth control removed, and so the couple began their baby-making plans. But as time went on, nearly 6 months had passed. Not only did Avery show no signs of pregnancy, even her relatives were coming more and more often, thinking that she was unable to have children. Mary was about to go to the hospital for a medical checkup, but then she met an old woman on the road. The old woman said she wasn't there for that. She just had some questions she wanted to ask Mary in private. Although she was surprised, but Mary followed the old woman to her home. The old woman didn't just come up and say something. First, she complained that she hated the so-called Freedom Day. Then she went into the kitchen and turned on the tap. The old woman said that in fact everyone in the silo had been watched by the Ministry of Justice. This was to prevent them from overhearing their conversations. Then the old woman asked Mary 3 more questions. Did you ever wonder what was on the servers they emptied? And what was in the books they burned? Were those really the work of the so-called rebels? Obviously, these questions would have been fatal in normal times, because in the history of the management of the silo, the relics of the books were destroyed by the rebels. Mary, who is already extremely curious, found Alan, a computer repairer, as Alan had always been a keen researcher of historical relics. Mary thought she could learn something from Alan's research, so she came to find him. As it happens, Alan responded to Mary's questions. He pulled out an old hard drive from a junkyard. Alan said it was very well encrypted and protected. He had no way of cracking it. If he wanted to know anything about it, it would be up to Mary, an engineer, to do something about it. And so it was. Outside, the silo was celebrating its 140th anniversary. Mary and Alan were breaking the ban on deciphering historical relics. Mary is the best engineer in the silo. With her deciphering, on the hard drive is a file called 1A. Item number 169 appears on the computer. Alan was happy to see it. He couldn't wait to open it. One of the files was called 1 to divided by 1098. Then after a quick load, all the plans of the silo they were in. The plans for the silo they were in were all there for them to see. Mary immediately took off her glasses and said she couldn't look at them because it was a violation of the ban, plus the possession of historical relics. If the management found out about this, the fate they faced was exile from the silo. Mary gets up and prepares to leave and told Alan to delete and destroy the hard drive. Alan didn't listen to Mary. He went back to his computer and watched the contents, and he discovered that right at the bottom of the silo, there was another passage that had never been mentioned before. On the other side, Mary, who had left, rushed back to the festival. She blended in with the crowd to celebrate the anniversary of Freedom Day. But how could Mary have left these growing questions? How could Mary have left them behind? With these questions in mind, Mary was not even in the mood to continue with her daily plan to make a little man. She was in no mood to continue. She couldn't even be bothered with her day job. After thinking about it for a while, Mary left work again, saying she was not feeling well. The time came 2.5 years later, the day the sheriff was going about his daily business. The old sheriff suddenly brought over a file saying that someone had committed suicide. The man in question was Alan, the repairman Mary had met 2.5 years ago. He had jumped to his death from a silo on the 120th floor, but the exact cause of death is still being investigated. So in order to investigate the cause of Alan's death, the sheriff took his men to the engine room. He found a woman called Alice. She was a mechanic in the engine room. She was also an old flame of Alan's. But after the sheriff had seen this Alice alone, he actually decided to walk out of the silo like his own wife did. And so it was. The sheriff was also dressed in a protective suit. A wool cleaning cloth was put in his pocket. After putting on his helmet, the old sheriff himself opened the door for him. The sheriff did not hesitate to step outside, for at that moment he believed his wife's words. And like Mary, the sheriff stepped out of the hatch, and the people inside were also watching from the screen. Alice was here too. Outside, the sheriff was stunned by what he saw. He saw the birds and the flowers that Mary had spoken of. The sheriff was delighted. He went back and cleaned the dust off the monitor. He was about to experience the beauty of nature, but he hadn't taken more than a few steps when he suddenly felt breathless and collapsed to the ground. He struggled to remove the helmet from his head, as if the helmet was the culprit, but he was too slow. Even though he had removed his helmet, the sheriff fell forever.